The North American Hockey League's secret weapon. It's the CGHL. We're going to discuss the North American Hockey League, the CGHL, their relationship, those Americans playing in the CGHL that come to the North American Hockey League, and a lot more coming up right now. Hi, I'm Jeff. I'm with Junior Hockey Advisor. We're going to talk about the CGHL. There are 450 to 500 Americans playing in the CGHL at any given time. Well, the CGHL, unlike the North American Hockey League, is not one league. It's actually 10 leagues. It's made up from teams from coast to coast. All the junior hockey leagues are represented on this map. For the purpose of this video, we're only going to discuss 7 of the 10 leagues. We're going to eliminate several because they don't have relevance to playing Division I college hockey or playing in the North American Hockey League. So we're going to take off the Maritime League, we're going to take off the Quebec League, and we're going to take off the Superior International Junior Hockey League. No disrespect to those leagues, but for the content of this conversation, of this video, there's just not a purpose to explore those. That leaves 7 leagues. I broke those down by size of the league and the amount of players. You can see the OJHL is by far the largest. The BCHL and the AJHL both are large leagues. Then the remaining 4, the Saskatchewan, the Manitoba, the Northern Ontario, and the CC, which is the Central Canadian League, all have roughly 11 or 12 teams playing. Now you can see the percentage of Americans on the right-hand side, and you see where the low points are. Manitoba is a low point, which is kind of expected. They don't have a direct pipeline because there's not a population of American players that sit right below them that would feed them. The Ontario programs clearly make sense because they have Michigan and New York to their southern border. The BCHL is a whole different subject. We'll talk about that later on why that percentage is so high. But I want to point out the percentage of Americans compared to the amount of players in the OJHL. That is a very low number for the amount of players and the proximity. You'd think with Ontario having Michigan and New York as their bordering states, that number would be higher, but it's not. We'll get into this later. I'll talk a little bit about the BCHL and give you some suggestions on where to get more information. But there's a ton of Americans playing in the BCHL, and the majority of those players come from the East Coast. I also want to point out to you that there are 3 leagues of these 7 that actually have American teams participating. The OJHL has the Buffalo Junior Sabres, the BCHL has the Wenatchee Wild, and the Northern Ontario Junior Hockey League has the Sioux Eagles. There are actually 2 other teams for a total of 5 playing in the CGHL. The 2 other teams play in the Superior International Junior Hockey League. Once again, I mentioned the BCHL, and I had further information. I've got a whole separate video called British Columbia, the 51st State of Hockey, that gets into the nuts and bolts of the BCHL. Take a look at that far right column. I just added that in. This is players to the NAHL from last season to this season. So what I think is most important to notice is that every league has a good distribution of players that move on to the North American Hockey League. But you can see that there's a great distribution in all the leagues. So if anybody tells you that you cannot play in, for example, Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League and move on to play in the NAHL, that's just not true. It happens all the time. You can see that by the numbers that are presented here. The North American Hockey League has approximately 90 players at any given point this season that are players with CJHL experience. The interesting thing about this is 19 of those players were drafted into the USHL. That's important to know because it shows that they're already on the radar. They're on the radar playing in the CGHL. 10 of these players already have D1 commits prior to going to the North American Hockey League. Why is this important to know? Well, it's important to know because most people would look at that number and say, there's 10 players already committed going to the North American Hockey League. They must all be coming from the BCHL. And you couldn't be farther from the truth because of those 10, they come from 5 different CGHL leagues. So 5 of the 7 leagues actually produced at least one Division I player that went on to the North American Hockey League prior to actually joining the North American Hockey League team. That's a pretty interesting stat. Those 90 players represent 23 states. Here's the real meat of it. The players are still coming in large doses from the top producers of players at all levels. If you look at NHL players, you look at Division I players, you look at top junior players in the United States, they're always coming from Michigan, Minnesota, New York, and Massachusetts. However, the CGHL sending players to the NAHL, where is Mass? Well, Mass doesn't exist. And the reason why it just doesn't exist, there's a few players, but there's just, for the most part, they're non-existent, is because Mass players have other options. Mass players have the ability to play prep hockey in their backyard close to home. Prep hockey, you either do what's called a PG year, so you stick around for another year to get older, stronger, better, or you repeat your 10th grade year. You come, not everybody, but some players actually repeat their 10th grade year coming in. Either way, you're getting an extra year there, and that's that year of development before you move into the North American Hockey League or the USHL. The other thing that happens in the Boston area or the Massachusetts area is you can stay home and play junior hockey because you've got, I believe, 5 leagues pulling out of that market. Of course, you've got the North American Hockey League in that market. You have the EHL, which is a strong league that's in that market. You have the USPHL, which I believe there's a team on every block now in Massachusetts. And you have the NCDC, and you also have the NA3HL that has close proximity too. In some cases, there are 2 or 3 junior teams skating out of the same rink, not only in the same area, but the same rink. So you're chocked full of junior hockey in that area. So you don't see as many players from the Boston or the greater Boston area, Massachusetts area, moving on to the CGHL. It happens, but not anywhere near as big as the other states, especially for as big as Mass is. Now, those players can actually move on and not even leave home. They can move on to junior hockey, not leave home, and then progress from there. It's important to also take a look at where these players were before they went to the CJHL. The same demographic breakdown or league breakdown and common root areas are the same with Division I hockey and once again with pro. The majority of these players have Tier 1 elite experience. They came from the Tier 1 elite league. They came from the High Performance Hockey League, the HPHL. They're coming from prep or they're coming from Minnesota high school hockey. Those are your 4 major areas that players are coming from. 25 of 26 teams have a CGHL presence of at least 2 players. The one team that doesn't, we've already discussed that. That is the Northeast Generals from the Massachusetts area. As the time this was filmed, or the time we put this video together, they did not have any presence on their roster of a CGHL player. That could change tomorrow. Now, some of these teams inside the North American Hockey League have 6, 8, 10 CGHL players on their roster. Some have bought in that this is their way of replenishing every year. Other teams use different sources. But the North American Hockey League, there's several teams. I can tell you that last year, Johnstown went with 10 or 11 players to the Final Four in the North American Hockey League, one of the better teams last year. And most of those players were first-year North American Hockey League players that were playing from the CGHL. So it can happen in many different ways. So what do you gain from this by watching this video? What do you walk away from as a future junior player? Well, the first thing I would note is there's no easy path. You know, there's plenty of opportunity if you're a good hockey player to play in the CGHL. There's plenty of opportunity, and they're all flavored a little differently. It's a different brand of hockey in the BCHL than, let's say, playing in the CCHL. They play a different style of hockey, and you can only know that by taking time to watch it on Hockey TV, taking time to go out and visit programs. I know it sounds like a lot, but if you're going to play in the BCHL or if you're going to play in the Alberta Junior Hockey League, I would absolutely go visit before making that trip, or Manitoba or Saskatchewan, just because it's a drastic change for players. There's no easy path to get there. You have to be a quality hockey player to play in these leagues. You might find yourself with an opportunity to play in the league, but if you're on the last place team and you're one of the last players picked for that team, and you're in the stands, you're not doing yourself a service. Find a different situation where you're actually playing. All the CJHL teams or leagues have value. They all have different purposes. Even the leagues that I didn't talk about have quality teams and quality programs. By no means was this video put together to make any leagues look bad inside the CGHL. It's just to point out where the opportunities lie. There are many ways to get to NCAA Division I hockey. We're discussing today a path that takes you on a little bit more of a zigzag than most. Remember two things. One, most players, the majority of players, don't commit to college hockey until they're 19 years old flat. That means they're not committing until their last year of junior hockey. That's a fact. That's a fact across the board. Number two, very rare is a player going from U16 to the USHL, moving on to play as a natural freshman at the NCAA Division I college ranks. The players that do that are usually close to or already on the NHL short list. Okay, they're going to be drafted players. Rarely are you seeing players move straight in with 1 year of USHL experience. So the majority of players can play on 1, 2, 3, 4 junior teams, either ascending a ladder up or even moving side to side as they move through their path to get to NCAA Division I college hockey. Some of the most consistent good hockey players I've seen have actually zigzagged through 4 or 5 teams before they've actually settled on their NCAA Division I school. Because you move from program to program does not mean anything except for you're ascending up the ladder to progress with your career, and it's expected. The other thing is please do your homework. This video is to try to open up opportunities because you know more and educating more on the opportunities that are available. But it's still up to you to do the homework on a few things. It is imperative that you look at everything. The social side of things, where you're going to live as a player, the development path for players, meaning, and development's such an overused word, but do they teach skill progression? Do they teach system progression? Do they watch video? Can you get evidence of all this stuff happening before you make a decision? Because a lot of teams will say, yes, 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 we do that, we do that. The best ideal situation for you when you're walking into a team is a team that has a general manager that's separate from the owner, has a head coach that's separate from the general manager, and has an assistant coach that's separate from the head coach. All of them empowered to make decisions on the team that are functioning parts of the team and just not window washing makes it look like there's one. A lot of teams cut corners and have a coach be the GM. But in most cases, it's not good. You want to have separation. You want to have lots of eyes looking at different angles on the players to make sure the team is built properly. And you want to look for that. You want to make sure there's an assistant coach that's empowered to make decisions, that his voice is recognized and heard inside the locker room by the players and by the head coach. Because the more eyes from different angles on you, the better as you progress up the ladder and you try to improve your game. So I hope you enjoyed this. Once again, I'm Jeff. I'm a junior hockey advisor. We've got tons of other videos out there. We've got a video out there on the British Columbia, like I talked about. We've got videos on the USHL, this one on the NAHL. We've got videos that deal with the Alberta Junior Hockey League and many more coming. Please, if you're watching this on YouTube, like this. It's the only way we know that people are watching. Subscribe to us if you'd like so you get information on our next videos coming out. But we really need your support. Let us know. Give us some feedback. Tell us how we're doing. I hope you enjoyed this. Good luck in your hockey career.